This happened back in 2020, right when the world started shutting down. Everyone was locked inside, scared, restless, trying to stay safe, but not me. I've always been the kind of person who finds peace in the middle of nowhere, away from people, away from noise. So while most stayed home, I packed up my gear and hit the road. Camping felt like the only thing that still made sense. I used COVID as my excuse to disappear for a while, to drive across states, explore different national parks, and just breathe again. One of those stops was a small creek deep inside Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado. I won't say exactly where for obvious reasons, but before I tell you what happened there, I should probably explain why I needed to get away in the first place. Something went down in 2019. Something bad. Let's just say it cost a few people a lot of money, and my name took the fall for it. Overnight, my reputation was gone. People hated me, even people I thought were friends. I had to move out of my apartment, change my number, quit my job. For months, my phone blew up with messages from random numbers. Some were insults, others were threats. Sometimes I thought it was a group of people, other times it felt like one person. Someone who really wanted me to suffer, and then, all of a sudden, it stopped. No more calls, no more messages, just silence. I thought maybe they'd finally moved on. I wanted to believe that. So when I decided to take that trip to the Rockies, it wasn't just about nature, it was about escaping everything that had been chasing me. I drove 3 hours out, parked my truck, and started hiking up the trail toward the creek. The forest was dead quiet. No footsteps, no voices, just the crunch of frozen snow under my boots and the faint sound of wind slicing through the trees. It was early winter, cold enough for your breath to hang in the air, but the creek itself wasn't frozen yet. It still flowed, calm and steady, like it didn't care what the world was going through. Standing there, I remember thinking, finally, peace. I didn't realize that peace wouldn't last. That night still plays in my head like a movie I can't turn off. I found a small clearing, a little off the main trail, the kind of spot that felt private, but not too far from the path in case I needed to leave fast. I set up my tent, gathered some wood, and started a small fire. The air smelled clean, sharp, like pine and cold earth. When the flames finally took, crackling and spitting tiny sparks into the darkening air, I cooked a few sausages on my little stove and sat down beside the fire with my book. For the first time in months, I felt calm. The soft roar of the flames, the slow flow of the nearby creek, it was the kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. After a few chapters, the daylight started fading, and the shadows stretched long between the trees. I turned on my headlamp, rolled a joint, and took a few slow hits, letting the smoke curl up into the cold night air. For a while, everything felt right. Then, my phone buzzed. Once, twice, then again. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was some notification or random spam, but it kept going, vibrating hard in my jacket pocket. I finally pulled it out. Unknown number, a bunch of messages. My heart dropped before I even opened them. It had been months since the last time this happened, and a part of me prayed it wasn't starting again, but when I read the first message, I knew. "How's your camping going, buddy?" The second text came just seconds later. "It's beautiful out here." And then, "I see why you came up here." I froze. My hands went cold. For a second, I tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was someone I knew messing around. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The words didn't feel like a joke. They felt close. Like whoever was sending them could see me. The weed was starting to hit hard, and my brain began spiraling. My heart pounded, my throat went dry, and I kept glancing into the trees, like I'd see someone watching me. I typed back, "Who is this?" My fingers shook as I hit send. If they'd only asked how the camping was, I might have believed it was a family member, but the part about seeing why I came up here, no one was supposed to know that. I was alone. No one knew where I was. The messages stopped for a while, but the silence didn't make me feel better. The longer I stared at that glowing screen, the louder everything around me felt. The trees creaked. The wind whistled through the branches. Every sound was too close. I stood up, turned in a full circle, scanning the woods with my headlamp. Nothing but black trees and falling snow. I reached into my bag and pulled out my P365 handgun. Just holding it made me feel a little steadier, even if I knew it wouldn't fix what was happening. Normally I'd put out the fire before calling it a night, but the thought of being in total darkness made my stomach twist. I crawled into the tent, zipped it up tight, and sat there staring at my phone. I waited. No response. Minutes passed like hours. The firelight outside flickered through the thin fabric of the tent, giving everything an eerie orange glow. I tried to distract myself by reading again, but the words on the page blurred together. My thoughts kept circling back to those messages. I switched to YouTube, scrolling until I found some random true crime video, ironically about a guy who went missing while camping. I figured listening to someone else's nightmare might make mine feel smaller. It didn't. About 20 minutes in, my phone buzzed again, a new text. My stomach turned as I unlocked the screen. Doesn't matter anymore. That was it. No name, no context, just those words. My pulse hammered in my ears. I typed back, "How did you know I'm camping?" But this time there was no reply. The longer the silence stretched, the heavier it felt pressing down on me. I started questioning everything. Was this some sick joke? A friend tracking me somehow, or one of those people from before? The ones who said I ruined their lives? But if it was them, how could they possibly know where I was? The thought made my skin crawl. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. I watched another video. 10 minutes, 15. The fire outside had burned down to soft embers, the light fading until the forest sank into total blackness. Without the crackle of the flames, the woods fell completely silent. No insects, no rustling. Just the wind moving between the trees, low and hollow like a whisper. Then I heard it. Soft, deliberate crunch, crunch. Footsteps. Human footsteps in the snow. They were slow, steady, getting closer. My whole body locked up. I held my breath, gripping the gun tighter, flicking off the safety with my thumb. The sound stopped just a few feet from my tent. I could feel my heartbeat echoing in my chest, every thud painfully loud. Then there was a flash. Bright, quick, like a camera or a flashlight aimed directly at my tent. I froze. For a moment, everything went quiet again. Then the footsteps started moving away. Whoever it was, they weren't running, they were just walking. Like they wanted me to know they were there. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed again. One new message. I unlocked it, my hands trembling. It was a photo of my tent, taken from the outside. Then another message followed. Have a good night's sleep. My stomach dropped. Something inside me snapped, like my fear turned into fire. Without thinking, I unzipped the tent, stepped into the freezing night, and fired 2 shots into the air. The gunfire exploded through the forest, echoing off the trees. A second later, I heard it. Footsteps, running fast, crunching through the snow, fading deeper into the woods. Whoever it was, they were gone. But knowing that didn't help, because it meant they'd been out there the whole time, close enough to see me, close enough to take a picture. I screamed into the dark, my voice shaking, threatening to shoot again if they came back. My own breath looked like smoke in the beam of my headlamp. I stood there for what felt like forever before going back inside, zipping up the tent and gripping the gun so tightly my hands hurt. No more texts came, no more footsteps, just silence. I stayed awake for hours, eyes wide open, my body refusing to relax. It felt like I'd downed 3 cups of coffee and adrenaline all at once. When I finally drifted off, the sunlight was already bleeding through the thin fabric of the tent. Morning. I'd never been so relieved to see daylight in my life. I packed up as fast as I could, not even finishing breakfast. The photo was still in my phone, proof that it wasn't a dream. But to this day, I've never found out who took it or how they knew where to find me. Whoever followed me that night didn't expect me to fight back. I'm not someone who looks like they'd own a gun, and that was actually the first and only time I ever fired it. But it worked. Whoever was stalking me finally backed off, and almost 5 years later, I haven't heard from them again. Still, that night changed me. I realized the woods aren't always peaceful, and sometimes the real danger isn't nature, it's the people hiding in it. When I was a kid, every October my family went to northern Michigan for a weekend trip. My Uncle Jim owned a 4-acre property with a big house that fit everyone. He was a true outdoorsman, always hunting or camping, while my dad just went along for the company. Behind the house stretched thick forest, marked with red paint where the property ended. Beyond that was miles of empty woods. One afternoon, while our dads were talking and half drunk, me, my brother Adam, and our cousins Jake and Joe decided we'd camp in the woods that night. The dads thought it was a great idea. The moms didn't love it, but they didn't say no. So Uncle Jim led us past the property line to a small clearing covered in soft green moss, what he called deer beds. He said it was the perfect spot for camping, that he'd used it before. It looked peaceful then. quiet and safe. But later that night, we learned how wrong we were. Our dads were already a little tipsy when they gave us what they called a crash course on how to set up a tent. They made us help, mostly to teach us something, but also because they didn't want to do all the work. The tent was huge, big enough for 4 kids like us, and once it was up, we threw our sleeping bags inside. It was still daylight, so everything felt easy, fun, and harmless. After setting up, we went back to the house, played games in the yard, and waited for dinner. During dinner, our moms brought up the whole camping in the woods thing again. They didn't like it. They said we were too young to be out there alone. My dad just laughed and told them we'd be close enough for him to hear our screams if something went wrong. Everyone laughed at the joke then, but that line hits different now. Later that night, our dads walked us back to the tent. The forest felt much darker than it had during the day, our flashlights barely cutting through the trees. We carried extra blankets and snacks, and I brought a deck of Uno cards to kill time. Once we got settled, our dads said goodnight and started back toward the house. Their voices faded, and just like that, we were alone. The quiet hit hard. We couldn't see any light from the house anymore. The only thing around us was darkness and the sound of wind moving through the branches. We sat in a circle, our flashlight shining in the middle, and started playing Uno. It was surprisingly fun. The kind of silly competition that made us forget we were surrounded by miles of forest. We played for about half an hour before it happened. A scream. Distant, sharp, and high-pitched. It sounded like a girl screaming. All of us froze. For a few seconds, no one even breathed. Then I remembered something Uncle Jim had told us once, that foxes sometimes sound like women screaming. So I said that out loud, mostly to calm Joe, who looked ready to cry. We laughed nervously and went back to our game. I even started winning every round, which made me feel like things were normal again. But then it happened again, louder, closer. This time, it didn't sound like a fox. It sounded human. Real. All of us went dead silent again. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I whispered for everyone to turn off their flashlights, and we did. Instantly, the tent was pitch black. None of us dared move. Running back to the house crossed my mind, but the idea of sprinting through that darkness with something chasing behind us, that was worse. Somehow, sitting in that thin layer of nylon felt safer, even though deep down, we knew it wasn't. We whispered, trying to convince ourselves it could still be an animal, but even saying that felt like a lie. And then, out of nowhere, we heard footsteps. Fast, crunching leaves, getting closer. Closer, until they stopped, right outside the tent. For one awful second, everything went quiet. And then it came. The loudest, most gut-wrenching scream I've ever heard in my life. It was right next to us, like someone was screaming straight into the tent. The walls started shaking violently, like whoever was out there was grabbing and pulling at it. We all screamed. Jake and Joe cried out in panic, while my brother and I yelled for everyone to get out. I fumbled for the zipper, my hands shaking, and finally yanked it open. Cold air rushed in, and one by one we bolted into the woods. Our flashlights bounced wildly as we ran, the ground uneven under our feet. We didn't look back. Every step felt like something was right behind us. It was pure survival, the kind of fear that makes your body move faster than your brain can think. We burst out of the woods screaming, running toward the house where the lights were still on. By the time we reached the porch, our whole family was already outside, wide-eyed, terrified. We were all talking over each other, trying to explain what happened. The screams, the tent shaking, the footsteps. The adults looked shocked. Then I noticed something weird. My sister and our girl cousins weren't outside. I immediately accused my dad and Uncle Jim of trying to scare us, thinking maybe they'd sent one of the girls out as a prank. But when they told us the girls were already asleep inside, the blood drained from my face. That's when we all realized it wasn't a joke. Someone we didn't know had been out there with us. My dad and uncle grabbed rifles and stormed back into the woods. They were gone for a long time, but when they finally returned, they hadn't found anyone, just the tent. Half collapsed. One of the poles snapped clean in half. The next morning, we packed up everything and dragged the tent back to the house. No one said much. We didn't talk about what happened, but it was clear to all of us we'd never camp there again. And we didn't. After that night, we didn't even play outside after dark. Because once you hear a scream that close, once you feel something shake your tent in the middle of nowhere, you can't ever unhear it. You realize the woods aren't empty. And sometimes the scariest thing out there isn't an animal. It's the fact that you don't know who's watching you in the dark. To this day, I still have no idea who was out there that night or what they wanted. Maybe it was some twisted prank. Maybe it was something worse. All I know is whoever or whatever it was, they were close enough to touch our tent, close enough to scream right into it, and that thought still gives me chills. None of us ever went camping there again. Even years later, when we talk about it, no one laughs, we just go quiet, remembering that sound. The truth is, the woods can feel peaceful in the daytime, but when the sun goes down, it's a different world. What I'm about to tell you still makes me question what was real and what wasn't. This happened to my dad and me 2 years ago, and even now I still get chills thinking about it. I know how it sounds. If I were you, I wouldn't believe it either, but every word is true. 2 years ago, my dad and I went camping deep in the countryside. It was our way to escape real life for a few days. The place had hiking trails, zip lines, and a bit of a tourist vibe, but it also had deep history. Old Native American land. The first night was perfect. Families at nearby campsites, campfires glowing, kids laughing. The peaceful kind of night you hope for when you go camping. We cooked hot dogs, roasted marshmallows, cracked open a few beers, and chatted with people around us. But the second night was different. The staff told us we were the only ones left in the park, no other campers. At first it sounded great, the whole place to ourselves. We spent the day hiking, fishing, and listening to a scary podcast by the river, just joking around. By sunset, we were tired and relaxed, the woods quiet and still. Before it got too dark, we decided to stop by the park's information center to charge our phones and grab some snacks. That's when things started to change. The walk back to our campsite felt strange from the start. The air was heavier, thicker somehow, and the sky had this strange tint, like twilight didn't want to fade. My dad looked over at me and said quietly, "Doesn't this feel off? Like we're walking through a dream?" And he was right. It did. The forest around us looked endless, stretching in every direction, and something deep in my gut told me we weren't alone. We didn't talk much after that. Every few minutes, one of us would glance over a shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something following behind. When we finally made it back to camp, neither of us mentioned how uneasy we felt. We just sat close to the fire, both pretending everything was fine. We roasted marshmallows, played a little music, even smoked a bit of weed just to shake the nerves. It wasn't exactly your typical father-son moment, but it helped us feel normal again. Until the sun went down. Once darkness swallowed the forest, the fire became our only light. The trees beyond it disappeared into blackness, and that quiet unease slowly grew into real fear. Around 9 p.m., we were sitting by the fire when we heard a loud bang. Like a tree falling, sudden and close. It came from the direction of the river, maybe 100 yards away. The sound echoed through the woods. We both froze. My dad grabbed his flashlight and we pointed the beams toward where it came from, but there was nothing. No movement, no glowing eyes, just empty woods. "Maybe Bigfoot," my dad joked, laughing nervously, but I could tell he didn't believe it either. A few minutes passed before it came again. Another bang, louder this time, but farther away. The same sound, the same weight. We flashed the lights again, but the forest swallowed the beams whole. The trees just stood there, unmoving, watching. Then came the third bang, closer, much closer. That's when fear started to take over. Whatever it was moving, circling us. Before we could even think, the fourth bang hit, maybe 20 yards away. My heart jumped into my throat. Whatever high we had was gone in an instant. My dad's eyes met mine, wide with panic, and without saying a word, we knew we had to get into the tent. We tossed the last bits of firewood onto the fire, hoping the flames would scare off whatever was out there, then scrambled inside, leaving everything else behind. I dropped to the ground first, lying flat, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My dad followed right after, slower, just as the loudest bang yet hit, so close it made the ground tremble. He froze at the entrance, staring out into the dark. I whispered his name, but he didn't answer. He just stood there, pale, eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. Finally, he jumped into the tent, zipped it shut, and whispered, voice trembling, "It's standing there." "What's standing there?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "It's like a wall of darkness." My stomach dropped. He sat by the zipper, holding the only thing we had, a small knife. I buried myself under my sleeping bag, trying not to make a sound. Then came the noise. Not footsteps, not a voice. Something else, a vibration that seemed to hum through the air, low and deep, shaking the ground beneath us. It wasn't just sound, it was like pressure, pressing on our chests. My dad whispered, "You hear that?" I couldn't even answer. I just nodded, too scared to move. The humming grew stronger, filling the air, making it hard to breathe. Then another sound joined it. Something guttural, raw, impossible to describe. It didn't sound human or animal. It sounded alien. The closest thing I can compare it to is that creature from Stranger Things, the Demogorgon, but real. It was like hearing something your brain couldn't process. We froze. Neither of us dared to move or even breathe. I remember staring at the small mesh window beside me, refusing to look through it. I couldn't. The thought of seeing something staring back was worse than not knowing. My dad sat perfectly still, knife in hand, eyes locked on the tent flap. And then, nothing. It's hard to explain what happened next, because suddenly everything just stopped. The noise, the vibration, the fear, it all faded. Like someone flipped a switch, and then black. Neither of us remember falling asleep, but the next thing I knew, morning light was creeping into the tent. My dad was lying next to me, still clutching the knife. I woke up gasping, heart pounding like I'd just been running. I reached for my phone. It was dead. My dad checked his. Dead too. Both had been fully charged the night before. We stepped outside, still shaken, and realized it wasn't morning after all. It was still pitch black. The air was ice cold and completely still. The food we'd left on the table was untouched. The fire, which we had built up before diving into the tent, was now nothing but gray ash, like it had burned out hours ago. The entire place felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty. We stood there for a long time, not saying a word, just listening. No animals, no wind, no sound. It felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. That night, we stayed in the tent, awake, waiting for the first sign of dawn. But the weird part? It never really came. When the sun finally rose, the light looked gray and dull, almost fake. We packed up and left without saying much, both of us pretending we weren't terrified. But deep down, we knew something had happened out there. Something we couldn't explain. Even now, when I think about it, I still hear that low hum in the back of my head, like the forest is reminding me that it's not done with us yet. We packed up in silence the next morning, neither of us saying a word until we were in the car. When we finally talked, we both admitted we'd felt that same presence watching us, hunting us, waiting for us to mess up. When we told my mom, she laughed it off, said maybe we were high or imagining things. But we know what we felt. It was real. We didn't see it clearly, but my dad did, and whatever he saw wasn't human. It wasn't natural. We've never gone back to that campsite, or camping at all. Even now, 2 years later, we still don't talk about it much. So what do you think it was? A person or something else? Tell me in the comments, and if this story gave you chills, wait until you hear the next one. Keep watching.